X-Men the Animated Series has returned, and we here at I Miss the 90s Studios, it's just an apartment, couldn't be more stoked, because it has been glorious. The X-Men cartoon was a staple of my Saturday mornings growing up in the 90s, as I'm sure it was for many of you. In fact, my very first episode on YouTube was all about my love and criticisms of our favorite mutant show. With the series continuing after being off the air for nearly 27 years, which, that's likely to be older than some of you. That makes me feel a little old. Just a little. Anyway, I thought it was time to revisit some of the classic episodes from X-Men the Animated Series. But this video isn't about the best episodes like Night of the Sentinels, or any episode featuring the Blob. This is about an episode that I think is arguably one of the worst the series had to offer. I know not every show is going to kick out bangers week after week. Well, except for Seinfeld, the show about nothing that strangely never had a series finale. The episode in question is called Jubilee's Fairytale Theater. Yeah, it's going to be good. It's going to be real good. Real good. You see, there was a trend back in the 90s where television shows would put out an obscure episode or two, like when Home Improvement showed us what the Taylors would look like in the future. We all saw that coming, right? Yeah. Or the Wild West episode of Power Rangers. It seemed like it was a requirement for every TV show to have a fantastical, one-off, wacky episode that had no bearing or consequences to the overall narrative. This is that episode. Jubilee's Fairytale Theater is loosely based on an issue of Uncanny X-Men from 1982 where Kitty Pryde tells Illyana a bedtime story, featuring the X-Men as fantasy characters. The difference? Well, that issue is actually kind of good. Professor Xavier rides a magic carpet, Nightcrawler is a cute yet horny bamf, also known as a group of interdimensional imps, and Wolverine is a Coors-drinking fiend with no name. I like that little hat, though. Jubilee's Fairytale Theater, however, is just kind of lame. The episode doesn't even try to hide that fact from the very start. Jubilee is giving some visiting children a tour of the caverns below the X-Mansion when one of the kids says,
"What kind of school does Professor Xavier run?" "Well, it's kind of experimental." "I bet you get to do some really rad things." "Some of us do."
And we see a flashback from earlier in the day where she is put in charge of the kids arriving for the field trip, with Professor X giving a hilarious excuse of why he can't be the one to give them the tour.
"These students were promised this field trip months ago. If the president hadn't called, I would have happily taken them."
I like Professor X's style here. Like, nah, I ain't got time for this shit. Why don't you do it, Jubilee? You're in charge. There's plenty of snacks in the fridge. Although I think he'd have some major legal trouble with the New York public school system for, leaving these kids unattended with a 16-year-old to explore caves underground. Yeah, I smell a lawsuit. After a cave-in leaves the kids trapped, Jubilee does the only thing she can think of. Tells a story to distract the kids from their inevitable death under the X-Mansion. To be fair, the odds of dying on the property of Charles Xavier is pretty high across all forms of media, so I knew what they were getting into. I mean, I get that she's telling this to kids and they all have ideas of what a good story involves, but it seems like she's had this fantasy in her head for a long time, and that fantasy involves barely covering up Wolverine's nipples. So, that's cool. We start with Gambit dressed as Robin Hood being chased by giant metal soldiers, and finally, after nearly 5 minutes, we get an action scene. And what a scene this is. I mean, just look at this. Look how strong these guys are breaking that stick. It's terrifying. Well, it seems like Gambit and these other people have met their tragic end. A hero arrives. A hero who gives people hope, whose stories are told throughout the land, and whose name strikes fear into the very hearts of evildoers everywhere.
It is her. She is real. The one they called Jubilee!
Jubilee. That's it. No cool name. At least in the comic story that Kitty told, there were some changes to characters, like Storm being the genie, or the Blackbird being Lockheed the dragon. And even Kitty made a little bit of effort by calling herself Pirate Kitty. Not creative, but it's something. But in Jubilee's fantasy story, where she is the hero and can single-handedly take on the bad guys, the best she could come up with was her own name. I mean, look, Wolverine is a troll, right? And even he's called Logan. Again, not great, but it's something. Also, she's kind of rude to him when he shows up in this scene.
This is Logan, my right-hand troll. He may look disgusting, but his heart is brave and true.
What a bitch. The reason Gambit was being chased was not because of his terrible Cajun accent, which is a perfectly acceptable reason in my book, but because he was hired by Magnus to steal the other half of the all-powerful McTaggart crystal and instead hid it where no one would ever find it. And within minutes of meeting Jubilee, he decides, you're all right, Petite. How about I show you where I hid the crystal? Because I am a thief and I do thief things. Remember when I used to smoke cigarettes in the comics? I don't know what that was. Better than Gambit.
I am the best of thieves, and this was a challenge, no?
The cave must not have been too hard to find because shortly after their arrival, Sabretooth and Magneto's Metal Knights show up. By this point, I think that probably 90% of the audience had turned off this episode because it became hard to believe that Jubilee would defeat Sabretooth with a couple of flips. Yeah, sure, she did it once in an earlier episode of X-Men. I'll give her that. But when your story involves Wolverine being a troll, you kind of expected them to fight while Jubilee and Gambit handled the Metal Knights because Wolverine and Sabretooth have a history together. But no. Leaving Sabretooth to presumably die in that cave, our heroes run off into the forest where they run into Zombie from Pee-wee's Playhouse. And he tells Jubilee that she's the best and the most powerful and the most beautiful in all the land, and only she can beat Magnus, and she's so awesome and so cool and does the best backflips. Cut to the team conveniently finding a hidden staircase to the dungeon where Magnus keeps his half of the crystal, an ambush for our heroes, Wolverine trapped by tentacles made of cum, and Magneto saying the stupidest fucking line ever.
I am beyond promises. I am power.
Also, I love that he apparently has no idea who these Metal Knights are. He just destroys them.
You have all been loyal, whatever you are. Your services are no longer required.
I don't get it. Jubilee once again shows off how cool and smart she is and destroys Magnus. Her story abruptly ends and the group finds themselves out of the cave and facing the X-Men. The episode is wrapped up with Jubilee serving all the kids hot chocolate while they wait for a bus that looks like it was drawn by a 6-year-old to pick them up. When questioned how she was able to keep the kids calm while trapped in a cave, she couldn't even get the details of her own story right. Wolverine was not yellow.
We all knew we were going to be saved by a one-eyed prince, a yellow troll, and the fearless Jubilee.
God, I hated this episode so much. I like Jubilee as a character. I really do. But this is one of the worst episodes to air from a mostly enjoyable series. The episodes Beyond Good and Evil from Season 4 were originally supposed to be the series finale. But Fox, in their infinite wisdom, ordered more episodes. And in addition to the drastic change in animation style, we got episodes like this, and one set in Victoria-era London.
Mr. Darwin, while your theory may explain diversity in the lower animals, how can your natural selection account for the human soul?
Fucking boring, man. This episode really isn't even worth your time. I really kind of wish I didn't watch it. I mean, I watched it at work, so I got paid for it, but I didn't watch it at work. It's really just not that enjoyable, except kind of when Jubilee calls Wolverine ugly. I mean, thankfully the first season of X-Men 97 is already off to a much better start in continuing the season than Season 5 could ever have dreamed of. I know that sentence was a little confusing, but you know what I mean. You know. And that's going to do it for this episode of I Miss the 90s. Thank you so much for stopping by. And hey, while you're here, why don't you subscribe to the channel? And maybe leave a like on the video. Maybe leave a comment down below on your least favorite X-Men episode. There's got to be one. If it's not this, I would be surprised. But, you know, there's some bad ones out there. Anyway, until next time, dudes.
I am beyond process!
And I'm Mike O'Connor. Later.